afternoon. Welcome to the August 22nd meeting of the Rotary Club of Des Moines. I am President Catherine Staub, and we are delighted to have you here today. And for those of you who are watching that video later, we are delighted that you are tuning in as well. If you saw me walk up to the podium, you saw my mask. So I am wearing a mask when I'm not eating or drinking or speaking into the microphone. Ruan Center, for those of you who are here, Ruan Center Property Management is strongly encouraging mask wearing, especially when you're entering or exiting the building and riding the elevator. We encourage you to, we certainly don't require it, but we encourage you to wear masks when you're not eating or drinking. We've also had some concern expressed by some members who feel uncomfortable not shaking hands but aren't comfortable shaking hands. So as I did last week, I suggest that you wave and smile with your eyes if you're wearing a mask because we don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable. There is also hand sanitizer on the tables, on the badge table, and on the buffet line where you pick up your plate. So we want everyone to have good health. Now I would like to welcome Jackie Norris and thank her for signing up to do our moment of inspiration today, followed by the pledge. And four-way test, she did sign up before her husband was asked to be our keynote speaker for today. Yeah, I know, that's what I was thinking. Thank you. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
So we're going to start with a moment of inspiration. And I was thinking about the photos that I saw yesterday, and they're all back to school. It's back to school week. And so some of you are parents or grandparents or aunts or uncles, and you've seen all these little people returning to elementary school or middle school, high school, college. Some are wearing masks, some aren't. It's definitely a time of high anxiety for people, whether they're teachers, they're elected leaders. I think everybody is just navigating the difficult time. And so, but the photos that resonated with me were the ones of the little elementary students with their backpacks on and lining the pathways where people are clapping and applauding and welcoming them to school. And it reminded me of the Mr. Rogers quote, it's about the helpers. When I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would always say to me, look for the helpers. You'll always see people helping. And I just want to encourage all of us as we enter, continued new terrain, that we thank the people who are helping. So it's, the crossing guards or the firefighters or the police officers or the teachers or the school nurses, everybody involved in the education system. Give them a elbow bump or a high five or just say thank you. And if you've got a little extra time, thinking about volunteering and boosting them up as well. So that's our moment of inspiration, if you could hold them in your thoughts over the course of the next couple of weeks. And with that, we are going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. And the flag is here.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And join us in the Rotary four-way test.
Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
And now we're going to encourage people to wave and smile with your eyes.
That's right.
Well, he's not here at the Embassy Club today, but a huge happy birthday to Kent Zimmerman. So if you see him, or Kent if you're watching later, happy birthday. I now want to introduce and welcome Peyton Haas from Drake University. Peyton, you want to stand and wave to everybody? So Peyton is our communication intern, and she has been helping with our social media,
and will help with other projects throughout the upcoming school year. She does have class on Thursday, but classes don't start until Monday, so that's why she's able to join us today. And since we mentioned that she's going to be continuing to do some social for us, I want to remind those of you who do use social media to be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and reshare some of our posts to your network because it helps spread the good news about the work of our club, and it may help to find some new prospective members to bring to lunch. Speaking of Drake, you will notice that before John takes questions, I'm going to be sneaking out. You also see Sean lurking over there. More about that in a minute. But today is welcome day for our incoming first year students, and it's also faculty meeting day. So I have to be back at Drake by 1. So that's why I'm hustling out of here. So I really know that the reason Sean is over there is because he does not like the way I ring the bell, and so he's staging a coup. But sort of the official way we're positioning it is he's helping me out since I have to be back to Drake. And now I invite Jackie back to the podium to introduce our program for the day. This can be dangerous because some of you who know John and I, we like to have fun in our relationship and our introductions. But I'm not going to go there today. I'm going to keep it very high level. He'll talk about his professional experience. He's here at the last minute. He's going to speak in his role as Polk County Administrator, but other things as well because he's had amazing life experiences. Here's some things you may not know about John. He is the lover of John Prine and the Eagles. He is a guitarist, probably a wannabe John Cash at some point. He is a lover of all things chocolate and ice cream. He's a farmer in our backyard. Never lost his farming roots, so we have edamame and broccoli and tomatoes and lots of other things. Come on over. And he's a great father and a great husband. So with that, John, I'm going to ask you to come up and speak to the group.
Well, I did get off easy. Thank you. And pleasure to be with you today. And Jackie and I, so I can say a few things about her since she tipped off on a few things about me. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary this past May. I waited into the second trimester of my life to get married. And I just learned this a few years ago with one of my boys' weekends that actually they had kind of given up on me ever getting married too. And they told me at our wedding they were making wagers about how long it would last. Yeah, I know, well, they knew me too well. And I have to say that they underestimated Jackie's good judgment. She has tremendous good judgment about when to ignore me. And that's contributed greatly to our success. So seriously, if you know Jackie, you know that it may not have been her patience that has gotten us this long, because she is determined and relentless. And I'm so proud of her and her new venture to be determined and relentless for Des Moines school children and our school system. So thank you. And great to see familiar faces. I wasn't quite sure. Thanks for sending the list over, and I see some good friends I've known for years. So pleasure to be amongst you. And David, I see you're not wearing your cowboy boots today. Y'all know David's cowboy boot story, don't you? So David likes to hang out in cowboy bars, and he was there one night. He was there one night with his big cowboy boots on, and an attractive woman who had been divorced for some time thought she needed to get out and have a little fun. So she offered to buy. She saw David in his big cowboy boots and offered to buy him a drink, and she says, "Is it true that big feet mean you're endowed in other ways as well?" And David had invited her to spend the evening, which she did. And one time she got up the next morning and handed David $100. And of course he was like flattered by this. And he said, I've never been paid for my services before. She said, don't flatter yourself, this is to buy a pair of boots that fit. So you'd be here to defend yourself, David.
We'll talk
So-
later.
I do want to talk to you about my role as Polk County Administrator. I thought I'd give you a little bit of brief as I can, my background. And so anything's fair game. If there's something else of interest that you want to ask me in our Q&A, I'm happy to field questions about any of the life experiences. And I do this with some trepidation because you'll maybe interpret this as my mom has, that I can't hold a job very long. But I have had a wonderful set of life experiences, predominantly here in Iowa, in government and politics. I grew up on a farm down in southwest Iowa, and I guess I still a farm kid in me, like to play in the dirt in the backyard. I worked several times for Senator Harkin over the years, both in his congressional campaign. I was his mobile office driver. I worked on his first U.S. Senate campaign, and also ran his Iowa operation when he ran for president. Those were served as chief of staff for Congressman Leonard Boswell and managed his first campaign. Ran out a couple other presidential campaigns, caucus campaigns in Iowa for Jesse Jackson and for John Kerry. I was the director of the Farm Unity Coalition in Iowa during the farm crisis in the 1980s. Bit of diversion from those paths, and owned a restaurant for a while in Greenfield, Iowa. Anybody, you or your children, think about going into the restaurant business, make sure they talk to me before they do that. Took a break, went to law school at the University of Iowa. Came back and after working for Congressman Boswell as chairman of the Iowa Democratic Party, when we elected Tom Vilsack as governor. It's probably when I got to know David best in the transition. He was extremely helpful, having served as chief of staff for Governor Branstad, and I have served as chief of staff for Governor Vilsack. Took a run for Congress in 2002, took a run for governor in 2018, and I'm glad to see that probably the better chance of our family winning is now running for office. I spent a considerable amount of time in the energy sector, having served as chairman of the Iowa Utilities Board. I then was nominated by President Obama to be a commissioner on the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So got through 2 Senate confirmations to serve in that position. And most recently, before we returned to Iowa, spent 2 years in Rome as the U.S. representative for agricultural policy at the United Nations, Rome-based agencies there. Came back and took over the State Public Policy Group and did that for 4 years. And then this past December, I was hired to be the Polk County Administrator. Jackie's now has taken over the State Public Policy Group. So that gets you an update of, I think I got most of my list in there, it's probably enough. But anything that intrigues you about any of that stuff, I'm happy to answer any questions about that as well. That's also the way of, when you get a last minute notice to make a speech, you're going to try to make it as interesting as you can. So I want to now just cover the Polk County Administrator role. And I was actually out at Prairie Meadows last night for a reception for the retired president of the Iowa Federation of Labor. I went over to the gambling board there. I was seeing if they had an over-under on how long I'd last as Polk County Administrator. But it's not been posted yet. It is an interesting job that I'm enjoying. It's fascinating every day, but when Jackie and I moved back to Iowa, we certainly had chances to go back to DC, but our passion was to get involved in local government and our community. And we knew that, plus raising our voice here was critically important for us. And then I was approached about this position with Polk County. It really fit the bill. I have done a number of politics on the state and federal and international level, but never really been deeply involved in local government. I can say the politics in local government are no less rough than they are in the state or federal level. But it has been perhaps the most challenging political/government job that I've had. I say that 9 months into it, so I'm hoping that'll subside over the next few years. But it's an interesting form of government. First of all, it's a different set of issues. I've dealt with kind of more global issues. This hits right home. This is roads, this is bridges, this is immediate social services, and law enforcement, which has been fascinating. And I think it takes a different engagement from elected officials and public servants when you're dealing with issues that are so close and personal to people. Can often get a little bit more emotional, actually, and engaging. And I found that refreshing, but it also is an interesting form of government when you have essentially our legislative body are also our executives. We're in state and federal government. There's clearly a division in roles and responsibilities. But I essentially have 5 bosses. First time I've had 5 political principals to work for. But having been a chief of staff for a governor and a cabinet secretary and a U.S. congressman, where you have 1 principal to care for and work for, it's really been a fun venture into both politics and psychology to navigate that. And that's not to say it's right or wrong, it's just a different way to get things done, which I find definitely more challenging to get things done more efficiently. And I enjoy all my 5 supervisors. But they are making policy, they're making votes for decisions, and of course they have a chair who I'm most responsive to, but at any given time, they all have their own districts and they all feel some executive authority of what the county does. And so the layers sometimes, internal politics, I have to go through. I'd say slow things down. Maybe sometimes that's good. Make for a more thorough decision-making process. But there are also some times when I'd say it's less efficient. Again, not advocating it to change, just the reality which we deal with in our local government form of system here in Iowa. And so I thought I'd just venture into what I see really as some of the most challenging issues on the horizon for Polk County, Des Moines, Central Iowa, that the board is dealing with or will need to deal with over the next several years. Certainly, what I'm spending a great deal of time right now, as we all are, is dealing with COVID and the response. And actually, as a governing body, it's not a bad problem to have, which is how do we spend all this federal money we're getting? It could be a lot worse. It could be how are we going to get by, and where are we going to cut budgets? And when you cut budgets at local level, it goes right to impacting people's lives very directly. So the CARES Act has been extremely helpful for county government to maintain services. And I think our Polk County Health Department and the supervisors have been very aggressive about vaccines and trying to respond to the impact of COVID. I will share one figure with you. By the end of probably this year or early next year, we'll provide housing assistance at north of $40 million in 2 years. That is nearly 20 years of annual budget of general assistance for the county. Give some perspective. We'll have a meeting next week where we're going to do a deep dive. We have not done it today. We're going to do a deep dive of the recipients of that aid on how does their life circumstance have to get where they're at, what kind of help they need to get out. So we're not in this cyclical problem of just continuing to give housing subsidy assistance, but actually can begin to find a path out for as many folks as we can. And we have a captive audience with folks who are receiving this assistance that we need to get as much information from as we can. Particularly when we're now spending the American Recovery Act money. Polk County received, or has received half so far, we'll get the other half next year, $94 million in federal assistance to deal with the economic impact of COVID, but also deal with some long-term infrastructure needs such as water and sewer and broadband. And so we're beginning to chart that out. The county board has initially, not officially yet, but initially indicated that housing, healthcare, particularly mental health care, economic empowerment, be that workforce training, child care, economic assistance, and water quality as being areas to target that will have a long-term impact on Polk County, which is why those, I think, mirror the critical issues I'm addressing with you about what we're going to face over the next several years to make central Iowa and Polk County a place that people want to live. And I know Des Moines has done and Central Iowa, the partnership, done a great job of highlighting all those surveys that show we're the best in this, and we're the third best in that. But frankly, I think we have some underlying issues that if we don't address, threaten the long-term success path that we hope we're on. So that'll be a big focus of where we target those American Recovery Act dollars, those $94 million, over the next couple of years. And housing being one of those. I think you'll all probably follow the stories of not just the last several months, I think they've been more prevalent in the last several months. But we have a serious housing issue in Polk County. People like to call it a low-income housing issue. If it's a low-income housing issue, I don't view that as a housing issue. I view that as a low-income issue. And until we address wages and lifting people up and expanding people's opportunity to earn more through job training or child care availability, we're always going to have a low-income housing issue. But we also have a housing issue in general. So one of our goals with this Recovery Act money is to get to some long-term solutions for housing. And part of that is lifting people up with better jobs, better income. Workforce, as I mentioned, the child care obstacle for workforce and lack of available child care and the inability to afford child care, which is also income related. And getting better high-quality jobs and raising wages in central Iowa. And also tied to the workforce issue is immigration and diversity issues. I think it's well known, or I think accepted by the business community and the broader community of Des Moines and Polk County want to grow to the extent people want to see growth. That is only going to come if we encourage and better facilitate the immigration of all people into central Iowa. There is not growth here today or in the future without the realization it's going to take an open door, but and Polk County is in the process of setting up the Welcome Center to make it more streamlined for people to get here, get placed, get productive jobs, housing. But the shortage of workforce is what's going to hold us back. And we're not going to attract the vast majority of that workforce from current U.S. citizens. We'll get some. And it can't just be, although I think it's wonderful that we welcome Afghan refugees, but there are immigrants from all over the world that can contribute to our community and our workforce needs. But we have not sent very welcoming signals as a state for immigrants to want to come here. We have to change that in Polk County, which I think we have and will continue to do with the leadership I've seen from the supervisors. But we have to try and influence state lawmakers as well and tone down the rhetoric that certain people aren't welcome here. That has long-term implications if we want to grow as a community. One of our other challenges will be mental health. Now, the state legislature this year took away the mental health funding, took over the mental health funding from county governments. We have been doing mental health with one or two hands tied behind our back for the last several years because our formula had been frozen for nearly 20 years on our levy rate for mental health, which left Polk County always in a position to go to the legislature for assistance to fill in the hole which we couldn't cover with our county budget because we couldn't change our levy rate, and it was already dramatically lower than a number of areas of the state. So we approach this open-minded. We're hopeful that consistent funding from the state and essentially taking over the funding of our local mental health services will be a positive, but it's only a positive if they will continue that commitment into the future. And I don't see our mental health, we have not seen the trajectory of our mental health needs go down over the last several decades. And I don't anticipate it going down in the foreseeable future, particularly with the ramifications of what we're going through in our economy and COVID. So we'll stay engaged with the state legislature to make sure that just as we struggle with education, particularly in urban areas like Des Moines, for adequate funding for the different challenges we face that are unique to urban areas, and rural areas have unique challenges too, as compared to suburban areas, we will also need to make sure that state commitment, we'll make sure that state commitment, frankly, in my opinion, doesn't follow the trend of a unmet allowable growth need on the education side, that we don't have a similar unmet need on the mental health side. Because that is our local community. That is a service that Polk County has taken great pride in providing, and I think done a great job with the resources we've been able to leverage. But it is a front and center social services issue that county governments have been engaged in, and that's going to change. And then the last issue I'd say, I think this is our Achilles heel, is water quality. We can make Des Moines look as attractive to attracting people here as we can and are doing to deal with the housing issue. But I think long term, if we want to be the place where the younger generation, I get it mixed up, the Gen Y, Z, and millennials, want to come here and raise a family, which has been our mantra for years. It's one of the reasons the water trails gives me hope. I initially was really skeptical, but I've come around to being very supportive. But primarily for one reason, that it will put a higher focus on water quality. And you're seeing with the impact of climate change, it has been a tremendous resource for Iowa that we've taken for granted, our air quality and water quality. But long term, we are not on a sustainable path. It will cause much more money to clean up water when we could prevent it from being polluted in the first place. And it will impact our ability to be an attractive place to live. We invest so much in parks and recreation in Polk County, and long-term investment in water trails is great. But at the end of the day, if people don't want to get in the water, they're not going to want to participate, they're not going to want to live here. And we as a county have to do as much as we can to impact that, but also talk to our state leaders about impacting that as well. One small thing we're doing with ARPA money, about the Recover Act money, is we are going to invest with a local co-op with a new cover seeder machine, a cover crop seeder machine. Polk County has done great work in getting cited for our work with the saturated buffers and bioreactors that clean up the polluted water before it gets into our rivers and streams and lakes. Well, it's been successful on a cost-effective measure that's extremely ineffective. You need to deal with the problem before it's created, as opposed to trying to filter it out and spend tens of thousands of dollars after it's been created. So one of the things we're doing is partnering with the co-op to help fund a cover crop seeder that seeds into standing corn so that cover crop can take hold earlier in the season. And we know just incredibly emerging data and science and practice on cover crops. When you deploy them and no-till, you dramatically reduce both the need for chemical inputs and the runoff from chemical inputs. And we have to get more aggressive. The trajectory we're on right now to address this issue, we'll get there in about 125 years. And when they tell you we've increased our cover crop and no-till by 40% in just 2 years, well, 40% of zero isn't much. And it's not zero, but it's damn close to it. So we as a state, and I think as a community, have to insist on changes. And this will probably be the most controversial thing I say, but we have now, expecting our land mass to absorb from animal waste in this state the equivalent of the waste of over 125 million people. Think about that. We are the #1 state in the nation for production of waste per acre. That has to go somewhere. And it's going in our rivers, lakes, and streams. In the nation, we have produced, manufactured, and deployed nearly 1 billion tons of anhydrous ammonia since World War II. The majority of that going to agriculture, and more is that agriculture going on Iowa cropland. And that is exactly why we're spending millions to take nitrates out of our water system, and exactly why the Gulf of Mexico has a huge growing dead zone. That's going to impact us if we don't address that issue. So I think that is our Achilles heel. I'm glad to see the board is getting engaged in it. And we're also dealing with the climate change issue. We're in contemplation right now of a resolution on climate change. And what I hope comes out of this, at a minimum, I think it will, is that we do an energy and emissions assessment of Polk County operations, which has never been done. I was kind of shocked when I came on the job and realized we're building this great new sheriff's office building on Northeast 14th, and no one even looked at putting solar panels on it or geothermal in. So I'm trying to bring that energy background to this job and get very aggressive on both our energy consumption and energy efficiency and lowering our carbon footprint. Because of those of you who read this month's report, 6th report from the International Panel on Climate Change, we already have irreversible damage. And this can't be passed off the state, the feds, United Nations. This is everyone's problem. And I'm glad to see the supervisors are getting engaged in this. And at a minimum, we look at our Polk County operations and begin to prepare for electric vehicle fleet, for the Polk County vehicle fleet. And we lower our carbon footprint, but also save money by investing in energy efficiency and renewable energy in our Polk County facilities, and lead by example of what the rest of our citizens and our economy needs to do. So that's, obviously you get a little bit of my personal biases in that agenda, but the board will continue to stay engaged in one of the other incredible luxuries we have in Polk County is Prairie Meadows, which very few counties are in the position we have. We have a $312 million annual budget last year, but since 1998, Prairie Meadows has produced and we've invested over $600 million in community grants. So the Community Development Grant Program and the Community Betterment Program, it is a luxury that we as Polk County citizens have that many people don't, that the county government is, and those are all those grants. Many of you probably been recipients of those or help advocate for someone to get some of those. None of those come from Polk County tax dollars. They may come from Polk County taxpayers who are gambling and losing, or maybe winning too, but they don't come from Polk County tax dollars. So I think it's enabled us to keep a fairly consistent low growth in the county budget that pays for, a fifth of your county budget goes for law enforcement. We have about 1,500 county employees, about 600 of them work for the Sheriff's Office, which is a frontline service of local government. And about 10% goes to general services and public health and public works. But all of those development dollars that go out in our community from Polk County come from the gaming revenues from Prairie Meadows, which I think has contributed a lot to some very successful nonprofits, projects, and the growth that we're doing and the betterment of life that we've seen in Polk County, which should continue, hopefully long past I'm there. So I'll stop there. I appreciate the opportunity through your supervisors for me to get to do this and happy to answer questions.
John, it's been good to see you and Jackie working out at Walmart. It's been good to see you and Jackie working out Walnut Creek Walmart. So obviously, to use a metaphor, it seems to me people are getting themselves in shape. So if you did decide to run governor of our state, what would be your top 5 priorities?
Well, if I
Correct.
or she would run, what would be the top 5 priorities to run for governor on?
Correct.
I've already named what I think is the first one, which is water quality. And it's not just water quality, that's the poster child, but this is soil health too. How we treat the soil is what creates our water quality problem. We've lost nearly half of the organic matter in our soil in the last 60, 70 years. And we've replaced what that organic matter does in terms of productivity in our soil with chemical inputs. At the trajectory we're on, we will have no organic matter left in our soil. Not too long past mid-century, 20, 60, 70. So it's not sustainable. And it's causing an impact on public health and safety and the attractiveness of Iowa. We both live here, but also our economy in general. We know from emerging practices that you can reduce that soil health loss, actually reconvert it to healthy organic matter in the soil, lowering your need for chemical inputs and cleaning up our water supply. We have to get aggressive about it as a state. So that's a critical issue for the future of our ag economy. I believe these probably appear on my list of priorities for Polk County as well. But we have to be open for new residents, new Americans in Iowa. If you look at our rural communities, that's the only place there's growth. Maybe a few exceptions, but that's really the only place there's growth, is where they have been welcoming, not without challenges, but that's gonna come. We have to be able to meet those challenges and provide the public infrastructure, education, and housing, and support for our businesses to grow by attracting a workforce. And it's only going to come from the immigrant community. And that's an issue I think we have not dealt with well in Iowa. The signals from this administration have been, you don't look like us and talk like us, we don't want you. And that has to change. So I think immigration, but all the things that come with that. A public education system, and you grew up and I grew up at the same time, we just expected Iowa to be the first or second. Minnesota would beat us once in a while, but we expected Minnesota or Iowa to always be jockeying for the #1 public education ranked system in the country. We've come to accept mediocrity, and that's not good for our long-term growth or quality of life. So public education will be in that top 5 list.
That's 4.
Huh?
That's 4.
I didn't come, you can tell I haven't been contemplating running again. I'd have those 5 down like a science for you.
Yeah, maybe 5 is denial and ask another
There you
question.
go. I can't say that we, one of the things I think, and one of the things I learned when being governor, Bill's next chief of staff, which I probably underappreciated, having not been in the executive branch, not been that involved in my life in state government, but certainly see it now in Polk County, and this isn't a really fault or change to the current administration, it's just, your #1 responsibility is the health and safety of your citizens. Which is why I put water quality and that into that bucket of health safety. But I would be dogged about this new mental health program to make sure we actually maintain our commitment to keep mental health funding at the level it needs to be. Which is I think we've done a lot in the last decade in the state and our society to address mental health, but we're not there yet. And it impacts every family that I know. So healthcare and mental health care, we have a hard time with the healthcare system and the role the federal government plays in that. But on the mental health side, that would be definitely a priority. And frankly, I've come around since I ran for governor. We got to legalize marijuana and dedicate every dollar of that to mental health in the state. We are bleeding money at the borders. It's not like people aren't using it. But we have not set a mechanism up to help them by denying that we don't have that usage in our state. And that could be a huge productive funding source for mental health issues. Yes.
Can you tell us-
That would, legalizing marijuana wouldn't be an issue I'd run on, but I do think, listen, it's gonna happen federally at some point, and we are losing revenues, and all those revenues could be going into mental health fund. Yes.
Can you tell us about the thought process going into the $6 million commitment for the soccer stadium?
Tell you about it. You said that the question was, tell about this $7 million going into the soccer stadium.
Yeah,
And
what
the
the
thought
thought process was in coming
Yeah.
up with that decision.
Yeah. I think the thought process, I'll just go through them here. One is, I think the number one thought process as a concern was the DICO site. I mean, that has been an eyesore for Des Moines since I went to college at Simpson, 40 years ago. There used to be a bar down there we used to go to. But that's the number one thing. We cannot let the opportunity to clean up that site go by the wayside. I think the second opportunity that the board considered was it does bring a whole new sports culture into downtown Des Moines that is a positive for long-term growth in this community. And so that was an opportunity that was too big to miss. Early on, they tried to approach this like Wells Fargo. This is not Wells Fargo. This is not a revenue generator. And county owned. It's going to pay off the bonds for itself. We looked at the impact on property taxes, which is what you often look at for a development project like that. How many years until the increased property values in that region would pay off that money? But Des Moines tipped it. And so we really won't see any property tax revenue effect for over 20 years. But we got past that because of, I think the long-term impact on the DICO site, the attractiveness of the development in Des Moines, not just Des Moines, but I think this is going to be a regional attraction and help all the surrounding communities, which is why we put in $5 million and then offered to match $1 million from Des Moines and $1 million from surrounding communities. We had some communication from surrounding communities encouraging the board to do this. So we thought, well, great, we'll encourage you to do it too. And so it is, I think overall, just quality of life. That's motivated the board to not want to see this not go away. The original ask of the board was for $27 million. But we challenged them to find other sources. The landing of the state, $23 million was critical. And once that was done, the board wasn't going to let this fail.
And what's the total project value,
Well, the total stadium value in the surrounding area, I think, is in this, I can't remember, 60, 80 million, somewhere in that range. The whole vision for the development is over 600 million of investment. So that was a big part of the justification. Yes?
John, thank you very much for coming and stepping up and being your speakers today. On a more general subject, we've learned over the years that the federal government is a very effective tax raiser, revenue gatherer, which has allowed it to give block grants back to the states and communities, et cetera, which is all really good. At the supervisor's level, is there ever any discussion about the possible inhibiting of the ability for state and local and county governments to raise the funds with the federal government dipping so heavily on their tax raising ability that that there's a lot of money out there, but there eventually has to be a limit as to what people can pay. And is there any concern about what the increasing of the federal taxation may do to local and state?
The short answer is we have not been in discussions about what the national fiscal policy around these assistance funds and national debt will impact our ability to govern in Polk County.
primarily, we're all in the same boat in this, every county, every city, every community across the country. So, if it were to have a long-term, if it at some point has some huge recessionary effect that devalued property, that might affect the county budget, one could say that's a possibility. I don't see that. I mean, remember this $3.5 trillion that they're proposing now is over 10 years. And it represents just at or just slightly less than 1% of our GNP over those 10 years. So while I, like you, am concerned about long-term debt, having that $3.5 trillion impact our economy to a great deal just because the national debt, when it represents over 10 years less than 1% of our GNP, it's the GDP, I'm sorry. I don't think economists are freaking out over this. But I think the upside is we're going to, and cities and counties across the country are going to be able to invest in a lot of infrastructure that's been neglected for decades, that has, I think, just as much or more ability to create economic growth than if we did nothing in non-response to both COVID and the impact of our economy, and continue to neglect the infrastructure needs we need to build for economic expansion. Broadband here in Polk County, roads and bridges, converting into a new energy system that's more efficient. You know, every fossil fuel we burn in Iowa isn't generated in Iowa, doesn't produce revenue in Iowa, but every solar panel and every wind turbine that goes up in Iowa, that creates more economic opportunity for Iowa. Part of this legislation will expand the opportunity for conversion of our energy system. So I think the positives outweigh the negatives, but we have not had that in-depth economic discussion in Polk County about how it might eventually affect our budget and revenues.
Thank you, John, for spending time with us today and your kind remarks and such a wonderful, interesting, and informative presentation. And by the way, we appreciate you filling in on such short notice. It's very much appreciated. We are donating the book Cranky Right Now, and this is what it looks like, to the Downtown School Library in your honor, and I know you've taken a few moments to inscribe some encouragement to the students, so thank you for doing that. Friends, next week, September 2nd, our own Rotary District 6000 Governor Alka will be here to talk about the role of District 6000 and Rotary and her activities there. I know it will be a very informative meeting, so I certainly encourage you to attend, and if you have the opportunity, take the time to meet Alka. She is a wonderful, wonderful Rotarian. Friends, thank you for being with us today. If you're visiting here, welcome. We're glad that you're here. We'll hope you consider coming back. And thanks to all of you who are here today and for being part of the Rotary Club of Des Moines. We are adjourned.